All right, this oblique can be a little confusing if you've never drawn obliques very often. You remember my first video on these, I said you're dealing with surface planes as you're moving back. So here we have the front plane, which is going to be this circle. Then the second plane back is here, which would be these circles. The third plane will be this surface that joins those two, and then the fourth plane is the rear. But to draw these, you have to draw the front view first and then project everything back from the front view, because looking at the front view, these line up horizontally in the front, but as we project them back in an oblique, they will not line up horizontally. So here we go. You take your paper, and I have already figured out where my object is going in here. I've already centered it, and I've drawn a square here for the larger circle. And let's see, I just kind of extended the lines across. What I want to do first with this is go ahead and mark my center lines for that large circle. I'm going to concentrate on the large circle first. And then I want to come over here to the right and draw in the center lines for the smaller circle. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares across. Okay, and then another 1, 2 squares to the end. So 1, 2. Okay, and let's see. Oh, that was 2, so it was 4 squares. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a small square for the circle on the right. I don't really need it. I do need where the center lines and stuff cross up here though, and there. All right, so now we can go ahead and draw in our large circle here. And you remember the little trick where I used the paper to do that? I'm going to go ahead and measure. So that was 2 inches, and I'm going to lay that down and mark an inch both ways so that I'm getting a diagonal. And since this is a little bit larger circle, you can put in additional diagonal marks. You don't have to use just one. Okay, and now I'll go ahead and lightly put in the large circle. Okay, so I've got the large circle here, and I've got this little square of where the smaller circle would go. Now what I need to do is I need to project back, and we're going to go ahead and go with 45 degrees again. And so I need a lot of points, and we'll start with the smaller circle here, and I'm going to erase out some of this because that's going to get. I don't need the corners of the square up there. Okay, so I'm going to go from the center, and I'm going to project back at the 45 degrees, if I can see straight to get it lined up. Okay, all right. Now then, I look in the book and I see that from the front plane to the second plane is 1 square. So that's going to be 1/4 of an inch back. So I'm going to measure 1/4 of an inch back on that diagonal line and put a mark. That is the new center mark for my circle. That's where the center of the circle is actually going to be. And because it's I drew this square, I really don't need it. I can project back from that, or you can work just from the center line itself. It's probably more accurate just to work from the center line itself. So I'm going to take that out. Okay, so what I kept, this is my original center mark. That's the 1/4 inch back. Now I need to draw my circle that is 4 squares diameter. Easy. I'm going to go ahead and do a center line for those. And I'll measure that. 4 squares is going to be 1 inch, so it's a 1/2 inch in either direction. But since they're not lining up on the grid, measuring is a little easier. And if you want to measure diameters, you can measure and mark the diameters. And so I'll sketch in my circle. Okay, now since those are both finished pieces, I'm going to go ahead and darken those. It'll be a little easier for you to tell. Okay, so this is plane 1, this is plane 2. Plane 3 is 1 square back from here, and what I need for plane 3 is where this surface intersects both of these larger circles. So I need to these points here, and they come up to be tangent. They're not at the center marks or the quadrants, but they're tangent to these large circles. Excuse me. So I have to draw those circles over again. So we know coming back here that it's 1/4 of an inch back. It's 1 square back. So I'll repeat the process that I did to draw the smaller circle. Come back 1/4 of an inch. And make my marks for a 1 inch diameter circle, so it'll be a 1/2 inch. And I don't need, well, yeah, I do need to the right. I was going to say I don't need, but since it goes beyond the quadrant, I need to put that mark in. Okay, so here's my center. I'm going to pencil in those circles. Getting a little confusing here, huh? What do you think? Okay. Now I need to go back to my big circle, and let's project the center of it back at 45 degrees. And this was 2 squares back from this circle, so it'll be a 1/2 of an inch back. Now with this one, I do not need the left side. All I need are the right halves of the circles. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4 squares radius. So a 1-inch radius. And I'm going to go ahead and put me in a couple of diagonal marks because this one being larger, it's a little more difficult to draw. All right, and now then I'm just going to pencil in half of that circle. Okay, so I've penciled in half of it. What I need is a line that's tangent for the upper portion of this arc to the upper portion of this circle. And so I'm going to use my straight edge and kind of line up until it becomes tangent with both of them. And I'll put me a line across there. And I want to do the same thing on the bottom, even though it's behind both of those circles. I need to know where it's at because I'll be able to see it here on the bottom. Okay, and in this one I can darken that. I can darken that. Darken the arc coming back, and remember this will become a straight line that's going to be tangent because you got one circle going behind another circle. We do a straight line that's tangent, and we'll do the same down here, going tangent from one to the other, and then I'll finish that arc. Okay. Now we don't have anything right here because that continues on back. Same way over here, this continues on back. So now I have to repeat that same process for the rear surface to get the rear arcs in. And in here it's 4 back. So that's 1 inch back. That puts the center right about there. What's a 1 inch radius? Okay, now I can kind of pencil that in. And I don't really need this information in right here. Right here I'll have a tangent joining those two, and then there would be a tangent down here, but it's the same location as, it's pretty much the same location as that one right there would be. Now I need the same one for the rear back here, and I can just project this center line on over until it hits that projection line. And then I can measure that out. Very confusing, I know. All right, so I've got the rear arc, both rear arcs. They're joined by a tangent line. So I just want to lay a straight edge up there. And it'll be parallel to this line, just further back. And then across this bottom, I will have a tangent line. And we've already put the tangent line in there. And so now I can darken and then what remains is to erase out a gazillion construction marks, eh? Okay, so I'm not going to draw these inner circles. You can do those so that they're exactly the same process. Circle here, circle here. The problem being is on the rear, you can see the hole where it exits. So on this plane, the rear plane, at that center mark, you need to draw the smaller circle, the hole that goes through it, because it's going to intersect with the front surface of the hole. And then you'll put your class, assignment name, number, stuff like that on your paper. All right, cool beans. If you've got questions, ask me or the lab assistant that's on duty in the room.